Greetings, everyone. This is Jeff Wilkerson, professor of physics at Luther College. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Today, we're talking about a book that was recently published that I wrote. University of Iowa Press published it, called 23 Woodcock in 22 Years, Reflections on Hunting the Night Sky and Our Place in the Universe. And so it's a weird book, probably the strangest book you'll ever read, if you do read it. And so it started out with me writing stories. I wrote a story for the story project that the Ruffed Grouse Society and American Woodcock Society have each year. And that story sort of got me thinking about birds and about land and about place and about the sky, and sort of primed my writing pump, as I like to say. And I woke up one day and I had another story that I wanted to write. And then I woke up the next day and I had another story that I wanted to write. And I woke up and this went on and on and on. And before long, I asked my wife, Kristen, I said, is this a book? And she said, yeah, I think it's a book. And so it didn't start with something that I wanted to say or a point that I wanted to make or something that I really needed to try to do. It just started with the need to write, the need to get out there and talk a little bit. And so if there is, as I look back on it now, all these years later, the process is a little bit slow getting going, right? As I look back at it all these years later and say, if the book is about something, if there are themes in the book, it's about place. And it's about being anchored to place with the sky above and the ground below and birds and land and the stuff we grow on the land and where we are, sort of being anchored to where we are now and recognizing that every day, every year, every month is essentially the same. When you build this sort of life around a slow a rooting in place, that all of the time, one day to the next or 1 year to the next is essentially the same, but entirely different. And so you've got this slow evolution and this slow motion forward. And so somehow that all came out in a bunch of stories, and the stories are about watching the night sky and about hunting a bird called an American woodcock. You see one there on the cover. Ava Shively, a Luther College grad, painted that lovely painting that you see there on the cover of the book. And so each year, I shoot a woodcock, and we have it for Thanksgiving, and we just had woodcock for this most recent Thanksgiving as I'm recording this now, and so I shoot a woodcock, and it becomes an important part for me to remember who I am and where I am and how I'm part of something bigger and part of a cycle. And so chapter 2 starts inside Langle. Sherry Carlson wrote these, did these drawings. There's another lovely drawing here that Langle did, the frontispiece. Let me see if I can find that frontispiece. There's the frontispiece. Just a fantastic drawing. Langle's a Luther student, a current Luther student, and so one of the joys of doing this book was the ability to work with just a couple of really talented Luther artists that way. So you see the end of chapter 1 here, or you don't see it because I just took the marker out. At the end of chapter 1, you see a nice. I talk about measuring out my life in woodcock, and you see that measurement drawing up above there. But we start at the year 2. It says, in a manner that I couldn't possibly fathom at the time, that old homestead place Woodcock was critically important in anchoring me to my new home. A marker of place, surely, because there are no woodcock any meaningful distance west of where I landed. I came from California to Iowa. And a marker of time, because these birds were foreign to me in my youth. But the bird was more than mere signposts signaling, you are here and now instead of there and then. No, it said something more like, I will bind you to the earth here and remind you of the sky above, ensuring you understand this is your home, a home stretching beyond this physical place to a community that understands what it means to make some sort of living from the wildness around, and a home with those who study the world, using data to build models of the universe. Tycho Brahe is an important reminder of that last place I call home. And then I talk about Tycho Brahe just a little bit. Let's read that next paragraph. With a plan to study law, Tycho Brahe matriculated at the University of Copenhagen in 1559, 80 years after the university's opening. He would be essential to Kepler's work in building a precise mathematical model of the solar system, but he would be just as essential in helping create what we call science today. as I routinely tell my students that if one is not careful, it is possible to fall in with the wrong crowd at college. And so it was with Brahe when he began hanging around the astronomers. The list of ways I feel connection with Brahe is long. When I work hard to teach the basic structure, as well as the nuances of the practice of science, I rely heavily on Brahe's practically in perfecting the concept of rigorously testing hypotheses predictions. As I focused my graduate school research on attempting to build novel instrumentation for making improved measurements of the heavens, I was emulating Brahe. I can trace part of my need to build a statistical understanding of the entirety of existence to Brahe's insistence on measuring a single quantity multiple times with multiple instruments. At a pivotal moment in his career, Brahe observed a bright comet, just as I would. I have poked around a little to see whether Brahe was a hunter, but haven't turned up anything other than the common recognition that he was born into an aristocratic life that surely would have included some form of hunting, albeit likely something I might not even recognize as hunting. My office has artwork adorning the walls and surfaces. There's a print of a ruffed grouse, a print of Andrew Wyeth's coot hunter, a photograph of Comet Hale-Bopp, and a print of a schematic from the planetarium patent application. The only images of real-to-life beings are two photographs of dogs that have graced my life and a print of a portrait of Tycho Brahe. I don't go out of my way to point this fact out to my wife, Kristen. So we talk about then comparing this land where I landed to land back home where I grew up. And so we think about a little bit about some of that space where I grew up. Chapter 3, the most memorable bird of the season came when I was visiting my parents a few days before Christmas, back in the land where my hunting life had started. In the long ago days, we usually hunted the hill above where my father grew up, sweeping a large circle above the house and garden, dropping back down to the barn on the other end of the property, deep in the valley below the hilltop property of my mother's youth. The barn sat near the potato patch where we would gather to plant each spring and harvest each fall. The potatoes meant to feed the entire extended family all winter. So precious were they that when a hard freeze threatened, someone stayed up watching the heater in the root cellar, attempting to ensure the crop didn't freeze. All my aunts, uncles, and cousins would gather for the harvest. Not that gathering meant much travel. I was the first in my generation or the one before to leave a 3-county area. When we dug the potatoes, my grandfather would drive the tractor, and my dad, being the oldest child, would stand atop the plow, forcing it to dig deeper, rolling red and gold treasure to the surface. The rest of us followed behind, some knocking dirt off the spuds and gathering them into piles for others to put into buckets. Still others carried the buckets to the wagon, where they awaited the trip to the root cellar. Let's finish that chapter out. On a gray December day, nearly 2 months after flushing a Wisconsin woodcock, we were hunting Grandpa Place on the property of my mother's youth, looking for grouse, but the grouse were already as good as gone in Indiana. As we walked a field road to get to a new section of forest, my childhood friend was cracking peanuts out of the shell, popping them into his mouth, my dad flanking him on the left and I on the right. On a lark, I turned into a short grass cutout where my uncle's family camped, in case a covey of bobwhite quail was present. It was a lark, because we hadn't seen quail on the property in years. They were struggling everywhere, the long tradition of southern bobwhite hunting disappearing rapidly. I can still picture peanuts flying as a covey erupted from thin grass 10 yards in front of me and flew right at my companions. Otherwise disposed, my friend had no chance to get a shot, but Dad got his first quail in maybe 20 years or more. I watched parts of the covey bank back through the woods, a few singles dropping into the tall grass of the gas pipeline that transected the property. We angled out onto the pipeline, and I put up one of the singles at my feet, knocking it down as it circled back toward the woods. It was the only time my dad and I ever took quail on the same day. We were ebullient as we strode back to the truck, laughing and talking while covering the ground where my mother had milked cows and slaughtered chickens for Sunday dinners, where I learned to fish and hunt and love the land. Maybe the quail were coming back, after all, and it would be a long future of wood ducks covering the streams, pheasants for every holiday meal, grouse in every northeast Iowa woodland, and quail back where quail belonged. It seems a little on the nose to point out that storm clouds were building directly behind us, literally. To the west, the sky had grown ominous, brooding, molten. That night it snowed and snowed. More than a foot of heavy, wet, killing snow fell, with flooding spring to follow. A dreaded 1-2 punch for ground-nesting wild birds. Those were the last quail I've seen. And we talk about then more settling into my life here, thinking about hunting and thinking about astronomy and thinking about teaching and students passing through. A bit about a property we call the lake, where my family had gone every year for what our only vacation of the year pretty much, where we went and fished, thinking about that as a special place that slowly evolved. And then let's just close it out a little bit right at the end. When I teach the general astronomy course, the most important linchpins are the stories of the move from geocentrism to heliocentrism and our understanding of spiral nebulae as external galaxies rather than gas clouds within our own Milky Way. We've talked about these a little bit earlier in the book. These are perhaps obviously critical because they are stories of our developing understanding of our place in the universe as well as the scale of the universe. For our course, these are also important stories for the people at their heart, how they went about their work, how they interacted with one another. Every one of us reminded that astronomy, all science, is a human endeavor undertaken by real human beings with beating hearts and flowing blood. Just as important, we see the differences between those two studies and yet the similarities that connect them. We can start to see the human study of the universe as a single story flowing through space and time, so that the flow connects the characters of the heliocentrism story, Tycho Brahe, Johannes Kepler, Galileo Galilei, etc., with the characters of the spiral nebula story, Heber Curtis, Harlow Shapley, Vesto Slipher, Adrian von Manen, Edwin Hubble, etc., with the characters of more recent stories, Jocelyn Bell, Toshiro Hayashi, George Smoot, Vera Rubin, Saul Perlmutter, etc. Surely, with our work together in the course or in the research lab, we can see ourselves as part of that flow. When I take data, shooting my repetitive images after things are set up, when equipment is ready to run for the night, but it's not yet sufficiently dark to start, I sit on the stairs to the observing deck and watch the stars emerging from the darkening sky. At that moment, I feel not only connected to the flow of human effort to understand the universe, but to all parts of the universe. When I walk the woods and marshes, I feel not only connected to my family, but to the characters of Anna Karenina, and to all the hunters who have walked this land before me, who have roamed anywhere on the face of the earth, extracting a living from that earth, and joined with all those who will come after me to do the same. My story is mine alone, but shared with all these others. I recall reading a story long ago in which the author claimed to have a unique perspective on Mario Lemieux's return to professional hockey after cancer treatment, the authors having had the same type of cancer as Lemieux. I thought at the time, and still think, that nothing could be further from the truth, each person's experience with any illness, even the common cold, being thoroughly unique to that person. My cancer journey is like no one else's, and yet nothing could connect us more. There was a couple of chapters about the disruption of the flow from a journey that I had with cancer. During my years of treatment, each floor of the clinic had its own vibe. The madding bustle of urology, the quiet serenity of medical oncology, the steady down-to-business churn somewhere between the other two of radiation oncology. Each stop was filled with faces at different places in the battle, each fighting a different battle, but all of us connected in some way, just as we were linked through space, and to people all over the world engaged in similar struggles, seen and unseen, and attached through time to people who had come before us and who are still to come, waking today or tomorrow or in the next millennium to a forever altered reality when they learn they have their version of that disease that we were all fighting together and all fighting alone. So that's it. You know, there's more stories of place and time and motion. And so that's the book, 23 Woodcock in 22 Years, Reflections on Hunting the Night Sky and Our Place in the Universe. And you heard just a few of those reflections here right now. And I just thought I would shoot a little bit of video to let you know about it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great day.